Good to have you guys here. Welcome again. Really excited to be here today on the Tatro Show. For those of you who don't know, I'm Rob Tatro from robtatro.com, portfolio manager here at Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management and at the Tatro Wealth Advisor Group. Super jacked and excited for our guest today. Let's bring her right in. Let me see if I could do this. All right, there we go. Tania Gonsalves. So really thrilled to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rob. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So Tania is a CFA. She's also institutional equity research, and her focus is primarily on healthcare and I guess pharma, both with a very Canadian focus on the pharma itself. So you have this really neat deck. I think it's relatively new. So I'm just going to share my screen here. There we go. So I'm just going to take you through. This is the first slide here. You talk about the drug development process and you talk about the basics and the cost basically and the duration. Like people think drugs and they think, a couple of years, but historically the numbers are a lot longer than that, right?
Yeah. So this is actually a good slide. Coming off of our COVID discussion, if you think a drug can get through the clinic in a year or two, that is not historically the case. Yes, the FDA is fast tracking some of these vaccines through the clinic, but historically drug development takes around 10 plus years. And costs, my average cost there on the screen, it's based on a big study done by the Tufts Center in 2014. And this is a commonly referenced study for all of us healthcare analysts. It costs $2.6 billion per drug. And of course that includes the cost of failures as well, but you have to factor that in for vaccine development. That's why I don't think a lot of these smaller Canadian companies can focus on this, because they're not that well capitalized to fund the failure rate of these drugs.
Well, yeah, you what did you say? 1.6 billion? The larger Canadian companies are at?
$1.6 billion.
Yeah, so that's more than their entire market cap, right? For the Canadian company, so they just can't do it, right?
So this slide just kind of shows you most companies, you'd start off with around 10 to 15,000 compounds. You go through a discovery period, and then you once you've weeded it down to maybe 5 compounds, those are the ones you actually take into clinical trials, and you're going to run from phase 1 to phase 3 development. Now, there is the one Canadian company that I was talking about that's doing something on the drug development side for COVID. I don't actually cover, it's called Immunoprecise, and I don't have a recommendation either or way, but they are operating in that first that 3 to 6 year segment where you're at 10,000 to 15,000 compounds, and they're the ones running thousands of compounds through software platforms and through their technology platforms to siphon it down to few compounds that they can take through to the clinic to treat COVID. And it's an antibody-based system. So they're specifically looking not for vaccines, but antibodies that can treat the virus.
Are they using like AI, machine learning to try to facilitate this process? I can't imagine how that must be just a ton of work.
Yeah, I don't know if they call it AI per se, but usually these platforms are based on like how the computers just learn how to fold a protein so that it can target certain receptor sites on a virus or certain cells that are diseased. So yeah, it's probably just a database that they're using that's siphoning out the best protein folding structures.
And these smaller companies that are in that space, the end objective is to sell the right to one of these compounds through a patent, I would imagine, to a larger pharma?
Yes. So it's very, very rare for any of these smaller biotech discovery companies to build out a sales force and actually start selling these things in countries like the US and Europe. More likely, they're going to partner with someone like a Pfizer, like an AstraZeneca, and they'll get development fees. So they'll actually help them fund that $2.6 billion if there's something promising there. And then those bigger companies get the rights, and the small company will get paid some kind of royalty stream. So they'll make maybe, let's say 10 to 20% royalties on the sales worldwide, which is great. You don't have to lift a finger to do any kind of sales work.
And that's what they're striving to get, right? Because they're going to have some of their compounds, like a lot of those are failing as well, right? They're not costing 2.6 bill, but they're costing something and they're failing as well, right? And there's their cost for patents and whatever else they got to spend as well on that. So I think it sounds like it works. Anyways, I don't know much more about it than that. I'm going to take you through the next slide here. So spend and success rates. So this is a chart that you have about. I'll let you take us through it.
This really just shows how unlikely it is for a drug to pass through the clinic. So when you're in phase 1, would I have that red circle around? If you're a phase 1 drug right now, you only have a 10% chance of actually winning FDA approval and being sold, which is very, very low. So these vaccines that are coming online right now, if they're being dosed in patients, they might have skipped a trial. They might have gone straight to phase 2 because this is a crisis situation and you need drugs as fast as possible. So maybe you've skipped right to phase 2, but even then, look at the success rates on these drugs. You've got a 15% chance of success. It's very low. So I wouldn't be baking in 100% success for all these vaccines that are going through the clinic right now. It has on average historically taken sometimes decades to find vaccines for diseases, and we still don't have vaccines for certain viruses. So be wary of, for the year end, getting a vaccine. I think it's very aggressive.
Yeah, I think take the timeline with a grain of salt, right? Depending on who's telling you that this is going to be out in the next week or month or quarter, just take it with a grain of salt. So you touched on the fact that some were able to skip phase 1 or phase 2. So I've, in part of my charity work, I've been working with the Canadian CMV Foundation, and one of our sole objective is to eradicate the number one cause of infant disability, and it's congenital CMV infections. It's a congenital birth defect. And we're working, I say we, I'm not doing anything except raising the money and raising awareness, but we're working on a vaccine, and we've been working on a vaccine for a very, very long time. And we're talking about a phase 3 vaccine, phase 3 trial that we're looking at, with 20, 30, 40,000 babies. Can't skip phase 3, can they? Can you tell us do you know what has been skipped, can be skipped, and definitely won't be skipped?
So phase 2 usually is not skipped. You can segment it like phase 2A is usually your dosing trial where you figure out what the right dose is to give a person. Phase 1 is really just, it's dosing, very, very initial dosing, and you're putting this in maybe like 10 to 15 patients. So it's a very tiny trial. Sometimes you can skip that phase 1, go straight to a phase 2A, and your phase 2A is your small dosing trial. Once you figure out that dose, you go to a phase 2B, which is more, do you have efficacy and are you safe over a long-term treatment duration? That trial, I don't ever see that skipped. Usually your phase 2 efficacy trial, you want that. Phase 3 is never ever skipped. Occasionally, if the need is great enough, so in a situation like COVID, they could perhaps do that on the market. So if they have really clean safety, a really good efficacy profile in your phase 2 trial, there is potential for it to be approved, and you start rolling it out, and whoever the drug developer is has to monitor all the patients as you go once you're already on the market. And based on that data, it'll be a phase 4 trial or like commercial trial. Based on that, they might have to take the drug off the market if it's not proving to have durability, or if anything turns ugly. But there are cases where that can be done.
So phase 3, I didn't know that. So phase 3 can actually be done in the market. So obviously there'd be some sort of balancing act there that would be, how many lives are we going to lose if we wait 6 months or 9 months or whatever it is versus if we roll it out now. And
Exactly. And you have to have really, really good data in your phase 2 for them to allow you to do it on the market.
Talk about efficacy on these things. What are they looking at? And I remember we had our virologist on, and I think they were hoping to get like 60 or 65% on the vaccine. Is that kind of the number that jives with you?
That is what I've seen. I'd see 65, anywhere from 65 to 70. I think would be good in like a very, very strong case. But it really depends. If all of these vaccines come out and they're all only getting 50% efficacy, would you run with that? Yeah, if that's all we have. So I think we have to see some initial data first to know.
I remember 10 or 12 years ago, I went to one of these conferences for the charity work, the CMV, and we were convinced that we had this phase 3 vaccine that was going to have proper efficacy. It was going to be rolled out. We were going to cure this thing. And the numbers came in at like just below 50%. So back to the drawing board. That was
children it's a much more difficult patient population. You need cleaner safety. You need better efficacy whenever you're looking at children trials.
Which makes sense, right? You don't want to start. What would you say to someone who would say, because I've had this asked to me by some people, I'm not taking that vaccine unless I know for sure that it's got all the phases and it's, we're not steamrolling through this.
I think that's tough because to know if it's going to work or not and to actually protect the population, we need enough of us willing to take it. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to be do we care enough about each other and about humanity and about our economic circumstance where we're willing to take it? And I think they should give it to low risk patients first. So people like us who are young enough and we're active and we're healthy, if something happens, we'll bounce back. If for some reason it causes COVID in us, it'll be fine. I don't know if you should be giving it to the elderly right away, but I guess that it depends on what kind of vaccine they have and how it's the efficacy that they've observed. I am absolutely of the stand that anyone who can take it, who feels healthy enough to take it, should be taking it. That's the only way that we're going to move past this pandemic.
Right. And then the debate is, okay, so if we're only going to give this vaccine to the healthy people initially, the younger people, like, why even have the vaccine, right? Like, the idea is we want to give it to my grandma, who's 95 and, in the old folks home, she can't leave.
But your grandma's not the one spreading it. It's us that are spreading it, that are out and about, getting it, not knowing that we have it.